there's been a lot going on, and we've begun talking about it in other domains of the field of Tantra about just a huge collective maturation process. And I caught myself in a couple of different things. The story's fun, but I won't go into it now. Just a different progression of, sorry for the dogs. We just have to include life. Um, I caught myself in a progression of thinking about things. And of course, at each level, I thought, oh, wow, I'm being so, aware and astute. And then I'd realize, oh boy, because the first one was really very individual, like from the field of separation. Then it became more individuated. And then I thought, wow, it's still all about me. And then I started being able to move into more of a collective thinking. And I started thinking that, Tantra, you've been down this road. And in a lot of ways, I'm a little more person-centric than you are. But I was thinking about it, and in reality, no, I'm ultimately field-centric. And it was important to me to say why I wanted to interview you. For me, what I'm about to say is both an acknowledgement of you, because for me, operationalizing or making something functional, rubber meets the road, spirit meets flesh, that's a very high order for me. I am aware that other people don't necessarily hear it that way, but I'm asking people to listen that way. So I wanted to interview you because you've been attuning to this tipping point that we're at collectively and individuatedly for a long time. So you've had a lot more observation than some of us, perhaps, or you have at least given value and weight to your observation. And some of us, we all go through our spectrum, just like I did when I was thinking this through. We may still think it's our circumstance. You may be due to for a nanosecond here and there. I'm not sure. That just may be part of the process of being human right now. But the fact that you've been attuning to this tipping point for a long time really mattered to me. You've got a high degree of accomplishment in this area of collective maturity and individuated maturity. And your standards are high. Your standards are high. And it's all about perpetuating or driving this maturation process on behalf of, and you may know, or any one of us may know what it's on behalf of, but there's a lot that we don't know yet until we arrive. And you've got a high degree of articulation. And it's not just putting words to something, it's articulation that moves and shapes. So those were what had me need to interview you. And I really appreciate you making this space available a lot. I really appreciate it. So
let me just say one thing, Deb. Just to talk to the audience for a minute. Deb and I have known each other before our children were born, and my daughter is 38 years old. So it gives you an idea of our longevity. I consider Deb my spiritual mom, because when Deb met me, I was so dysfunctional as a human being, it was shocking. And that means people went and bought groceries and put gas in the car. And I channeled most of the early times she was with me And she, and then over time, Russ, her husband, she's a therapist. And over time, she began to support me in finding the meta point, the value of being human. She really supported me in the value of being human and the value of me being human. I should say it that way. I knew the value of being human. I didn't know the value of me being human because the realm that I existed in was so pristine and so profound. The idea of bringing this spirit into human suffering was, I had an objection to it. Later, I found out it ain't so bad. So that's the background that this Create a World is in. And so I said, let's do Create a World because it's been on the back burner for a year. It was given to me as a gift of spirit, you could say. And yet its use of what is Create a World doesn't frame itself in the vernacular of the world we've been born into. It's literally to be somewhere where in our dialogue, in our listening, and in our presence, what we're present to, we begin to create a world, not to create a world what people would think, like through doing or through action or through application, but by being in direct communication with creation, which the field of Tantra Mud and any real spiritual practice operates in, because it's all about being in communication with our spirit. And spirit has different definitions, but our spirit is basically what enlivens us and charges us and makes this place paradise. That'll be the background we can use spirit for. Over to you, Deb.
I really thank you. That was beautiful. That was beautiful and gave people more background. I'm having trouble deciding which question to start with. But I think what I want to start with is, can you talk about your journey moving from who you were or where you existed and into your humanity, from both an experiential point of view, but mostly, I think, from a technical point of view, because I think there's a lot of that going on, of the kind of like spirit going clunk into human form. And I think there's a lot of discovery of it's not separate. It's not, there may be some distinctiveness, but it's not separate. So that's where I'd like to start. Did I say the question so it's clear for you?
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit in the news, see if it's going the way what you're after, okay? I think the thing that is in my memory the strongest, because I have no literal memory. I have no literal memory of even people that have been on this call with me, been with me a long time. I have very little literal memory of time events. And thank goodness I have Diane and C and others that can tell me what I was doing. And even when I used to lead, or still, not so much anymore, but when I used to lead retreats, I would have, whoever was supporting me would have to tell me what was happening, because I wasn't paying attention to circumstance. It's a really good way to get in. I think the most notable thing for me was very early on. I don't know if I want to talk about the first event, but the second event when I was 11 years old. And I had a revelation because I was in a very frightening situation with my mother, who was very angry and basically physically and mentally took it out on me. But it wasn't about, something in my head, something just kept repeating itself. And the two things that kept repeating itself was, you will not survive suffering. That was the big one. If you give in to this as suffering, you will not survive. It was like hearing from God. And it was actually a voice. And the other one was that I knew my mother couldn't help what she was doing. So there was this element of compassion. Now, I don't really hold my personality to be compassionate. Like you said, I'm really fierce. But there's another kind of compassion where it's technical.
Right.
My mother was broken. That was a technical thing. There was no reason for me to make up anything about my mother because she was doing what broken people do. She was responding to her terror and her fear. You might want to mute, Deb. Her terror and her fear and her hate. And yes, she was taking it out on me. And then in a very simple way, I had an incredible minister, Papa Kent, and these key phrases, because I'm very audient, I'm very aware of phrases that have profound outcomes if you hold on to them. It like a life raft. And one of them that people don't like very much is God wouldn't give you what you couldn't handle. So my confront at 11 years old, when my mother kind of went crazy, well, did go crazy, and at least through alcoholism and probably thyroid mismedicating. So these things were theories. I'm not sure the word, you could probably tell me, Deb. I took them as functional tools. One, okay, I had to handle this. Okay, got it. Because if God wouldn't give me what I couldn't handle, then obviously the action was handle it. It seemed really simple to me. You can't survive suffering. Oh dear, because I was suffering and I could tell my body was being traumatized. And I didn't know if I could survive I didn't know if I could survive survive suffering, but I was pretty sure I should. I was pretty sure, even though I didn't think I could, that maybe it would be a good idea to try to survive suffering, to try to not let it eat away at me. Those two things seem really, really, really important. And the third was that I had some kind of real active awareness of the person in front of me was more than my mother. She was a broken human being. And I think without realizing it at that time at 11, some part of me realized that it was my job. It was my job not to relieve suffering, because then I'd have to know suffering, and I shouldn't know. I wasn't supposed to know suffering. So how could I relieve suffering if I wasn't supposed to know it? That seemed very confusing. Remember, at 11, you have a very different type of thinking than you do when you're older, and you're in pre-puberty too. So you're pretty raw. You're pretty not inundated by any mature thoughts. So that was the first one. And then the other one was, so if I wasn't here to relieve suffering, then I probably need to discover the effect of suffering on the human system. That was easy. I could tell the effect of my system. I could tell the effect of my mother's system. But I think the other thing, which actually I probably wouldn't have recognized till this, if you hadn't asked me the question, Deb, is that I somehow knew the human soul, and I knew the human soul was beautiful. I knew it was exquisite, and I was mostly in the horror of what had happened to humanity, what had happened to the system or the structure of God that we call human beings. Something terrible had happened to it. And so I didn't have any, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. I didn't buy the program. Something was terribly wrong here. And this wasn't what human beings were designed to be. And I was getting to live the horror of what had happened to human beings. And then I remember this thought, and this thought has stayed with me forever. And remember, I have no recall of circumstance, hardly at all. Even my mother's violence, I only remember one incident. and yet it happened every night for a long time. And what I no, I forgot it. And what I wrote, oh my goodness, I can't remember. What was I saying? What was I just saying? You might have to unmute.
Yep, the impact on the human soul.
Oh, the impact on the human soul. Oh, I remember. So at 11 years old, I had this thought, and the thought was, wow, maybe if I can pull myself out of it, I will know how to pull everybody else out of it. And maybe, and this might be a little arrogant, but it wasn't arrogant for an 11-year-old. 11-year-olds still think pretty purely. And maybe from where I came from, this doesn't exist. And maybe if I can get awake to where I really come from and where I really belong. Maybe others that come from that, I didn't know what that was, and are that, they can remember too. I had no idea. Oh, one of the things that had happened, Papa Kent told me, was when he was our minister, when I was born, I kept dying. I was a 7-month preemie and I just kept dying. I had diseases that there was no place for me to catch them. I had my white corpuscles in my blood were rapidly eating my staphylococcus blood. I think I probably got blood transfusions at Duke University, although my mother destroyed all the records. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. But basically, the doctor told my mother, bless Duke University Hospital forever, said to my doctor said to my mother, I think she's allergic to being here, which was really true. And turned out, and he said, I think she's responding to this world at a cellular level. She may be a cellular empath. So actually, the terminology for what I turned out to have a comprehension about in my own head started with a doctor from India who was there trying to save my little life within the few months after I was born. So is that enough for now, Deborah? Do you want me to go further?
Yeah, let me see if, because one of the things you've talked about a lot is that you're very technical.
Very technical.
And when I'm practicing therapy, I am too. But I'm not technical from the point of view of only adhering to what they typically call evidence-based practices.
Method. You're talking about method.
Correct. I don't
stick to method.
I'm not a purist or a oh shoot, I can't think of the word. In other words, I attune to what's before me and then see what technical means.
Yeah, very well said.
Excuse me. So it's really dicey to review what you just said and do it so that I'm exploring the technicality, not making a rule.
Claire.
Living from rules is dangerous. Very dangerous. It's just like trying to do therapy from no guys. Sorry, people. Well, Molly's given her stamp of approval. So the rules are very dangerous and can lead you astray. A really good example from the world of therapy is, for a long time, therapists were taught to not self-disclose and to be very neutral, but then at the same time teach their clients to how to attune to themselves. I have never resonated with that, and I thought that was very faulty logic. Fortunately, lots of people are agreeing with me now. So that's an example of following a rule, spirit, the letter of the law, not spirit of the law. That's a good phrase that everybody will resonate with. So what I'm hearing you say is, even as you were exploring suffering, what the heck does this mean? I can't survive suffering, but I have to edge up to it enough to know suffering. Whoops, I slipped into it. Now what? There's, and I'm kind of exaggerating what you said.
No,
only
it's
to make the
pretty
point.
accurate, actually.
Uh, Eventually it became the same structurally as what you saw in your mother. Oh, broken human being doing what broken human beings do. Suffering is something that just has people do what they do, or just has certain
Well, actually,
impact.
suffering is a result of not being what we are. That's for sure.
Yeah,
But I was pretty sure that human beings didn't cause that. And luckily, my Papa Kent also knew that human beings did not fall from grace. They were not sinners, that something had technically happened that made human beings afraid of themselves, afraid of others, and afraid of life. Something had technically happened. Now we know that there was a gigantic meteor that hit the top of Africa, and that before that, the earth was incredibly fertile. The humans that lived during that time were incredibly flourished. And then all of a sudden, the very planet that they were living on was killing them. That would produce the species trauma.
yeah, it sure would. It sure would.
So let me just add one more thing about that, Deb.
Yeah.
So one of the things that began to happen is information began to come in that made sense. If we were in a technical problem called we're not supposed to suffer as a species, then what happened? And since I didn't buy, and definitely because of Papa Kent got a strong context for that human beings are born to love, and that's it. There's no other calibration. Then what was ever in the way of that needed to be gotten rid of. That was it.
That's the technicality.
Yes.
That's the technicality that allows it to be technical, not a rule.
Yes.
So that's excellent. Thank you. Okay, so what's the next piece that? So I think, and that even parallels some of what the process I was going through that led me to, interview Tantra, duh. Except I don't think it was just my idea. I think it was kind of nudge from spirit. Not I think, I know. So taking ourselves out of the personal, removing ourselves from taking it personally and having something become technical.
Actually it's both and.
Both and?
I took it very personally that I was suffering. I was really pissed off about it.
Okay.
And I was going to get rid of whatever was having me suffer. I was really clear about that.
Okay.
I was offended. So that was very personal. But to be at the effect of the personal of it, that I couldn't afford. In other words, when we're hurt, if we're at the effect of being hurt, or if we're at the effect, in my case, of being pissed off, we have no ability to think clearly. It's just that simple.
Yes. So to use some of the language of creation, being present to what you're present to and honoring that is not the same as being overwhelmed by it, eaten alive by it, taking it personally in that sense.
Correct.
So then in your time with me, what was it like? Everything you've just described. Yeah, I know it's a big ask.
It's going to be a funny answer is more likely. It's just going to be a very funny answer.
So what you just described was a long part of the journey, and there's lots of aspects to it. But generally, that's an overview. So then there was a point when there was kind of a chunk. Oh, I have now embodied as human. It had nothing to do with you have a human body, had nothing to do with that, as far as I can tell. It had to do with some capacity and awakening. But is that helping you know what I'm asking?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to talk to the people, not you, since you're a part of the story. So when Deb asked me what it was like, so there was a community that formed around me, first in Washington, D.C. area, and then we moved to Ohio and basically to tend to me and to let me do my work and make sure when I had these incredibly mystical episodes that I didn't go wandering around the neighborhood in my nightgown. Like when I in 1994 in Washington, D.C., when this God for me came to me and they had to peel my hands off people because I kept trying to take their clothes off because they were so beautiful. And I just wanted to touch them all over, and it was not socially really correct. And then my husband at the time had to wander around and it would see everybody was on duty in case I wandered out the door, began wandering out the neighborhood. So you could see that Deb as a therapist, I could have really been considered clinically insane. And basically there was even a sign on the door in Washington, D.C. that says, under no circumstances, take her to the hospital. Under no circumstances. Nobody has any idea what it was like to be taking care of me. Yeah, I am nothing like that now. Nothing. Rush used to pick me up after a retreat because I was so disembodied. I was nowhere. I have no memory. And then he would take me and put me in a hot tub until I would come back. They even used to take me. This is Deb I'm talking about. They even used to take me to horror movies. Honest, they did. And I'd be sitting in the horror movie. And then I go, oh my God, what are we doing in here? Because they had to shock me and get me back in my body. So that whole conversation about being out of body, I lived it. It's real.
Let me interrupt here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what was important about that from my point of view, I was a gatekeeper of distinguishing what was how do I say that?
What was a psychotic episode?
Thank you. There we go. What was actually psychotic, what needed hospitalization, which she never did, and what was just this process. Now, it was messy. It wasn't always fun. But I could always tell. And sometimes we got on the skinny branches and from the world's point of view, but not from what I could see. I mean, even from what I could see, it would sometimes be like, oh, we're getting really close to an edge. I don't, but it never went over. And that distinction, being able to distinguish that was really important, and regardless of what other people said. And it was very interesting. I think I can do this well. Nobody came out and said, oh, she's psychotic. But to have other criticisms rise was essentially the same thing. Essentially, and I don't know how to say it better than that at this moment. And that was part of the job, was to make sure none of that interrupted the process until I guess I would say until you could handle it yourself.
Until I came in.
Yeah. So now go ahead, please.
And just to say that, Carl Jung, I love his quote because he says the only difference between schizophrenia and mysticism is the mystic makes it to the other side. That's why Deb's my spiritual mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
She made sure, because I was an incredible channel. I was a great healer. The retreats were extraordinary. I mean, people on this call on Facebook were there. I mean, they know. But I also had no sense of personal self in the way other people did. It wasn't, I had more times out of that personal self than in. That would be the way I say it. And it was blissful. There was no anguish. it was blissful. It was like moving. I don't even know if I could even describe it because I remember it. It was like, I think the easiest way I ever have to talk about it is I was the ocean and the ocean was me. And
Mm.
I didn't have to think about moving me because if I was the ocean and the ocean was me, we were always moving together. And they're just this whole idea about being individuated from it. Every time I'd even get close to it, my system would kind of erupt. It wasn't even like I had an eye that was trying to get sane. It was just my system would back off from coming in. It would just back off. It wasn't interested. And I would be tranced out would be, I guess, the best way to say it. Go ahead, Deb.
That's a good distinction right there. I was the ocean was me. As long as the system we're born into perpetuates individual versus individual, not individuated, I don't think you could come in till that was reconciled.
Yeah, well, the story of the day I came in really has everything to do with some of the people in on Facebook Live and Deb, that a community built around me. And and this is, I think, the key element, Deb. The key element was that I got to be me, and I was a weird me. And so all the social constraints were off of me. I was free to figure out belonging as what I was. And that came from Diane Bennett, Beryl McCandless, Jim Williams, Deb Merchant, Vince, Janet and Mike Martin, Cynthia and Jara. They benefited from what the channel was channeling, but they didn't. And what Deb said is people would try to fit me in a category. This is hindsight. I wasn't really there for it, but they try to fit me in a category of expecting me to operate a certain way. And even now, I don't operate the way people think I should, because I just don't listen. I'm just not operating, of course, according to the social norms of the day. I'm operating in literally a different type of reality that I assert is related to the reality that this planet and her forms are designed to have. Do you want to add something, Deb, or do you want me to go into?
Go ahead.
So you have to realize the background of this of this thing that Deb asked me was that we had a sanctuary in, oh, I can't forget, Kurt and Salawa. I mean, there were loads of us, and loads of us, Holly. And we had a sanctuary in Washington, D.C., where it was for me, so I could work. And, but everybody got to, like those of you that did Spirals of Being, I was very transparent through that. So I understood the power of transparency is the key to true belonging. Because when we are transparent with each other and everybody goes, kind of like, oh, there she goes again. Who's going to follow her? It's just, it takes into consideration all this multidimensional faculties that we have that makes us pretty odd, but also pretty beautiful. And we've been shaped into this functional, proper to doing that drives people crazy. And I just couldn't come in. I couldn't do it. It wasn't that I might have wanted to. Like when my daughter was 12 years old, we went to New York and we watched Tommy, and she pulled a guy's coat next to her and said, my mommy's like Tommy. Everybody wants to be like her, but she wants to be like us. And she just doesn't know how. My daughter said that. And I didn't know how. But what happened was environmental. That would be the key. It was a technical thing. It was called environmental. So then we moved to Ohio. And the environment became family and kids in the swimming pool, and it was a paradise. I mean, it was just a precious paradise out in the middle of the farm country of above Columbus, Ohio. And one day, Deb was gardening, and I was sitting. She had a wooden box around a tree, I think, a little teeny tree, And I was sitting on the wooden box and one of the cats came up. I don't remember the cat's name. And I said to her, cat, I said, Deb, how long have you had the cat? Like time was showing up in my head, like past, present. I'd never had past, present before. I only had now. And she said, I think 5 years. And then I went, how long have you and Russ been married? And I think she told me how long she'd been married. And all of a sudden, this configuration of time that had a past began to occur, that had a past. And then that sort of happened. And then we went to the soccer game that Josh was playing in. And I was sitting over on a blanket because my head was going through all sorts of calibrations and all sorts of configurations. It was like a movie. It was like those movies where you see all these fragments start to fractalize and everything starts to figure itself out and everything starts to settle the equation of spirit and flesh somehow, or out of body and in body, I think was more true then. And I literally, when I came into body, I literally flattened on the quilt. I literally fell back on the quilt. And I don't know how long I laid there. I know the game was over and I remember somebody coming over to me. And I basically came in. And I think the value maybe is that because I was always conscious, I was always a conscious being paying attention to a problem that the human system had, and I'm saying human, I'm not saying human being, that the human system had, but somehow I knew the being of a human being. It survived my coming in and being fragmented and being broken. It survived the being of that goes beyond just human. And somehow at that date, when I was 54, I remember I was 54. I just came in. By the way, you all, I didn't know these were the questions she was going to ask, just to let you know.
Right.
She's caught me by surprise.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have to sit with what that's having rise in me, but it really is there's an integration. There's a whole sequence of meta points. And of course, I didn't get any. It really is like that. One of the illustrations you and Electra have used pretty often. Not the one that spirals up and back down, but what is the word telomere?
Oh, I'll get it. No, it's somebody will write it in the chat.
Okay.
I don't have the chat.
And I,
The wormhole that I can't remember the name of.
yeah, okay.
Somebody
See,
text me because I'm not looking at Facebook Live if somebody wants to tell me.
so individuated would be in the way I'm here listening and the way I've been present to our use of words as a collective in the field of Tantramat. Individuated is still part of the ocean we call creation. Individuated is, so it would still be, I'm the ocean and the ocean is me. I move, the ocean moves, carries me, all of that, without any loss of meanness. There was no, because you did not come in as an individual. You didn't.
No. And I didn't come in as a we. I came in as an it. Toroidal field. Liz just text me. It's a toroidal field.
Great. Great.
Thank you, Liz.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so that's that. So we got
15 minutes.
15 minutes. So let me see
We
which.
can always do part 2, Deb. I mean, nobody has to show up. You and I want to do this.
I think there needs to be a part 2 because I've got more questions.
But just do a part 2. If people benefit from it, they'll come. And if they don't benefit from it, we'll get practice before we start to use Create a World for other things.
Okay. I think that's brilliant. So I'm looking over some of my questions and getting things to go in order here. So given everything you've said, and I've asked and reflected back, what would you say all of that has to do with maturity?
That's a good question. We may have to we can dialogue about this. If you ask me what was the functional thing that happened to me that gives me this sort of affect that people see of self-confidence, like there's this affect of self-confidence. And actually I am self-confident, to be honest. But if I was to say what was the key comprehension that gave me this kind of affect of maturity, and I think I do have this affect of maturity, I would say is I knew I was sane.
Brilliant.
And nothing could mess with me about it. That I was quirky and I wasn't like anybody, but we have a lot of us not like anybody else. That's the way, in fact, none of us are supposed to be like anybody else. So it wasn't unique. It was accurate. It was technically accurate to be unique. And it just as it's technically accurate for every human being to be unique. And so there's something about, you know, what you are is sane. Not that you're sane in a medical technology, because you may not. I mean, I could have been defined what a hysteric, I think would have been one of them. Schizophrenic, was never
Not
paranoid.
schizophrenic, not schizophrenic.
No.
Hysteric, yes.
Yes, and a multiple personality, which I was diagnosed at. So the I that inhabited this body and this body took care of was sane as itself. Then I had to deal with the being sane as a self. And I think that's maturity. I've never been asked the question, but I think that might be maturity, because the thing is that like I remember the progression. The progression was all of you in the two sanctuaries gave me a way to belong. And in that belonging, I could examine myself, and I could, once I came into body, I could start to figure out my interface between myself and others as an everyday person. And mostly I did it by making values and then practicing those values. So I never looked out and saw how other people did it, because I couldn't do it that way. But I figured out what value being with another was for me. And then I practiced that. And I literally practiced it, everybody, wherever I come from. I don't know, it doesn't operate like this. Let me just tell you. And then the other thing was I think the real maturity was when I knew what was mine to do. I knew what I was as a being, and I knew the problems it came with, and I knew what I would have to be at work about, and I didn't blame others. That's one thing that's true, and you know this about me. I have never blamed another person. I have said, please get out of my way, but and they went 1,000 miles. But I knew that the technical problem was me and others, and me and life, which is, of course, the work we do in the field of Tantra Mat. And that I need to figure out what my accurate relationship was in those three realms. And there was a my, and there was a unique my. And then I had to let people know, and people know that now, that when I say I'm just not social, that's part of me letting people know, by the way, I'm just not social. And it's a very pragmatic, practical thing. And it can be called maturity. And I think the mistake of I don't like the word, first of all. That's why I love maturation, though. Maturation is organic. So I love that word. And somehow when it goes to maturity, it loses something.
Yeah.
But I think the real key uh to be on for that maturation of self within me was there. And it really came from that 11-year-old saying, if I can make it all the way to the other side, whatever the other side was, which I had no idea, if I can get to what I know to be real, then maybe other people can too. That was the premise that I operated from. I still operate from. Have more evidence now than I did at 11 for sure. And but there's something in that the maturation is a natural part of.
Yes.
They're one and the same.
Yes. Yes. And it's really, there's a lot of ways you could look at everything going on just in the United States and say we're nowhere close to that kind of maturation point. I look around and I say, oh, wow, we're edging up on it.
We are.
And for a lot of people, it doesn't translate. One way I know that is I've had some discussions with colleagues about COVID and the impact on our clients and families and what do we think's coming out of COVID, whatever. And I say, I think there's a massive amount of creativity that's come out of COVID and people haven't caught up to. That's who they are. For example, that's one example.
Mhm.
And for some of them, I can tell there's that tisk tisk. She's just not, she's
There's
just
those
not quite
rose-colored
connected to
glasses.
reality.
There's those rose-colored glasses again.
And I think, okay, that's something I have to learn to take care of. Just like if I was in my garden, I'd learn to add, this kind of fertilizer for this plant or whatever it is. That's oversimple. And I just think, all right, I have to learn how to take care of that or attend to it or pay attention or see it coming or something, because I know I'm accurate and it lands in their
Right.
world like tisk tisk.
But see, that's maturity. That's maturity. One of the three of my clients and I were really working. They're in business environments, corporation environments that are so toxic. It really is dog eat dog, and he who can blame the most and what's the other word? Even worse, diminish others the most wins. And it's very clear. It's a black and white reality. It's not. You can't be. There's nothing psychological in that. I mean, if there was, it wouldn't make any impact. And so this is a great thing you've suggested, because now we have to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
We have to figure it out. But that is maturity, is to figure it out. And immaturity is just blame or take away or
Feel
or
sorry for
pout
myself.
or pout.
Mm-hmm.
And but when you say, whoa, we got a new problem, I don't think this environment, and yet they're really good people in this environment, kind of, how do we be in an environment that we're so because everybody's looking at, well, I'm right, it'll prove out that I'm right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, how my percentage of right is higher than almost any human being you'll ever meet. If I walked around saying I'm right and then took my cookies and went home, it would be stupid. So being right has nothing to do with it. Can we be what we are, being aware of what we are present to and what's real for us? And when people ask us a question, we answer. And they don't have to belong to what's real for us. This whole thing about belonging becomes belonging to the right conversation or belonging to the right belief. But we human beings are individuated as unique and essential aspects of creation. What we should be doing is saying, where I exist, this is what I'm present to, and this is what I open up into. And that's that thing, Deb, you said, to go all the way back to the beginning. You can't make a rule.
Yeah.
there's no rules here, that there's no application. There's only, and this is the other exciting, you talk about creativity. What's exciting for me is everybody actually is individuating. And at some point, a bunch of them might murder each other first. I mean, we don't have that answer yet, but eventually they'll go, wow, to survive, I think everybody needs to be, we need to give everybody who's have their unique and essential relationship with life. And then maybe like what's happening in the field of Tantra Mut, which started this, everybody gets really interested in everybody's unique and essential relationship with creation or life or themselves or others. It isn't trying to dumb down or what you call redact. It's really how many amazing, in Ireland, in the upper part of Ireland, there are 365 islands, little teeny islands.
Wow.
On the way to Achill, I believe. And what's so amazing about these islands is they all grow different flora and fauna. So when you look out, there's this kaleidoscope of colors, and it's just amazing to look out on these teeny little islands. And that's what we are. And when we're in that, when we're in that kaleidoscope of our unique essential aspect of what we are to self-discover and to self-study what we're discovering. I went into self-study and self-training from the day I was born, because if I didn't, I wasn't going to survive. But now I know its value. I never quit. I'm in 2 seminars. I have the best doctors on the planet because we're co-creating. I mean, life becomes magical because you're self-studying and self-developing yourself in your interface with yourself, because I think interface might be a word we've never used, Deb, to coin something, which is what I think you're after in this interview. And and the reason Deb invited you all is she knows I do better if people are present. I don't do better just being talked to unless I have people present, because I'm listening to the field. But I think it's phenomenal how many people can get to, this is me, this is how I know myself as self. But then the maturing part is to develop the interfaces, which is so not kin to you, so like, the thing about don't plant marigolds next to corn grow. Well, you just keep your distance and plant them on the other side of the road, but this interface with, and it includes the interface. I interface with me every day. Me and me talk every day.
Yeah.
Me and others talk every day. Me and people out there talk every day. Well, me and the trees, me and the blocks, me and everything talk every day, basically. But it's the interface, I think, is the key.
Yeah, I agree.
We're trying to get to the key of.
Yeah. And I think now that you're saying that, that's not just a noun, that's an operational state.
It's an operational state. Well said.
And that's a piece I was after.
Yeah. Score.
Yeah, because, inviting others to join, I actually wasn't thinking that much about you do better. But I guess I was, because I was thinking about what optimizes her use of language. And it's having others. So, okay. So now
I want to reflect back now. So, because you're asking for the technical part, and then I think we can complete. I think we got one of the scores or checks we were after. So if we go back to that 11-year-old, we could say in hindsight, although I wasn't aware of it, I did not know how to interface.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to interface. Even at 54, I didn't know how to interface with others.
Yep.
I knew how to be present and what I was present to, open up into and have what I had. And then others came to benefit from that. But it wasn't my identity that was having others come, which I think sometimes people thought that I wanted people to come. I didn't even know if people were there. How could I possibly want them to come? So my maturation of being, not losing my spirit, because now it's more powerful and more beautiful than ever. And not now my recent interface is between my spirit and my body. So if you calculate through, you all developed a community around me, and so I could learn to interface with other human beings as the larger system of what I am. But it also, watching all of you interface and all the ways we had to interface that had to be delicate, I could practice, I could learn interfacing. And then as I became more adapted to human, there were all these cool things to do, like design businesses and design matrices for courses, all really cool stuff to do. And then I began to have events, like I began to work with people that had influence in the world. And then I learned that interface. So I think, and now after COVID, after almost dying of COVID, I'm learning, the body is learning, the spirit and flesh are learning to interface together, and I'm watching it happen. So I think interface is the key element, not to interface, but to know what you're maturing, to get able to interface. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. And I think that's an excellent wrapping up point and a launching point for next time.
Very good, Deb. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And how do
fun.
we, if people have questions, how do we do that?
If they have questions, they can write it on Facebook Live.
Okay.
So all of you that are on Facebook Live, if there's something you want to ask whenever we do this next time, then, which is probably next Friday, because I'm in prophetics, it's the only hour I have, and then just write them on Facebook Live, and Facebook Live's always available, and then I can go in and pick them up for you, Deb. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. If I could have them in advance.
I will send them, or I'll get Christina to send them as we get them.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Tantra. Thank you, everybody. Woohoo. I really appreciate this very much.
Love you as
Love
always.
you too. Bye.
We'll speak later about putting me on the hot seat, since I didn't know that's what we were going to do.
Okay.
I'll send a dream.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.